They doubted him. They whispered behind his back. The professor tried to humiliate him in front of everyone. But when he picked up the chalk, he did something no one saw coming. Julian Cross stood just outside the lecture hall, his fingers tightening around the strap of his weathered backpack. His heart was steady, but the weight of years bearing down on his shoulders made his breath come slower than usual. The air inside the hall was dense, heavy with murmurs and judgment. Not the loud, aggressive kind, but something worse, the silent kind, the kind that coated a room like humidity before a storm. He wasn't new to this feeling. The way people sized him up before he even had the chance to speak, the way their gazes slid over him and dismissed him as someone unworthy, someone who didn't belong. He had endured that for years. But today was different. Today, he wasn't just here to attend a lecture. He was here to make a point. Julian stepped into the hall, his boots thudding quietly against the worn tile floor. His movements were deliberate. He didn't hurry. He never hurried anymore. Rows of seats stretched back in perfect symmetry, climbing toward the ceiling that vaulted high above them like a cathedral. It felt appropriate, in a way. This place wasn't just an institution of learning. It was a temple of judgment. And judgment would come. Julian's seat was near the front, not quite dead center, but close enough to see every faint line of chalk dust on the massive blackboard. He had chosen on the first day, not to make a statement, but because from there he could listen without distraction. But now he realized it had become something else entirely. He slid into the chair, letting his backpack fall softly to the floor. Around him, the quiet conversations of his classmates buzzed like static. Some cast glances at him, quick flickers of curiosity. Others didn't bother with subtlety. He heard a whisper, too close to ignore. Why does he even try? He's not one of us. Another voice, more cautious. Chill. Let him dig his own grave. Julian opened his notebook slowly, the pages filled with neat handwriting and careful annotations. He ignored them. He always ignored them. But today he was listening. The door at the front of the room opened with a soft click that seemed to echo far louder than it should have. Dr. Adrian Mercer entered with a presence that demanded silence. He didn't have to speak. He never did. His reputation filled the space ahead of him. Brilliant, ruthless, unyielding. A man who believed that genius was a privilege, not a right. And it was his mission to determine who deserved that privilege. His methods were legendary. His dismissals devastating. Students who walked into his lectures, hopeful, often left broken. Julian had spent 3 years watching it happen. And yet here he was. Mercer's sharp gray eyes scanned the room with the ease of a predator familiar with its territory. His gaze skipped past students dressed in tailored jackets and gleaming watches, paused briefly on those seated near the back, then settled, deliberately, on Julian. A second passed, then another. Julian didn't look away. Mercer allowed himself the smallest of smirks. "Mr. Cross," he said. His voice stretched out the syllables of Julian's name as if tasting something unfamiliar. "Would you join me at the board?" The reaction was instant. A shift in posture, a collective holding of breath. Someone let out a muffled chuckle. Someone else whispered, "This is going to be painful." Julian stood without comment. He tucked his pen into the crease of his notebook, closed it, and walked down the short steps toward the front of the hall. Each footstep was slow, measured. He could feel Mercer's eyes on him, and beyond that, the gaze of every student in the room. He reached the board. Mercer handed him a stick of chalk. It was smooth, pale, heavier than he expected. He closed his fingers around it. Mercer stepped back, folding his arms. "Solve this." The equation was already there. A multi-variable function sprawled across 3 lines of chalk. It was complex, layered, and designed to mislead. At first glance, it looked like a problem of integration, but beneath that, Julian saw something different. A trap. He studied it, not moving. Around him, whispers floated up. He's going to blow it. But he doesn't even know where to start. Mercer was silent, waiting. Julian took a breath. Not deep, not dramatic. Just enough to center himself. Then he raised the chalk and made his first mark on the board. The room went quieter still. He worked quickly but carefully, his movements economical. Every line he drew was precise. Every variable isolated with clarity. Where most students would have followed the expected process, Julian took another path. He saw the shortcut immediately, a transformation that simplified the structure of the equation without undermining its integrity. It wasn't about showing off. It was about seeing clearly. Mercer watched him with narrowed eyes, his arms still folded across his chest. His expression unreadable, but Julian recognized the scrutiny. Mercer wasn't observing. He was hunting for the mistake that would justify what everyone already believed. Julian gave him nothing. Halfway through, he paused. Not because he was uncertain, but because he wanted them to think he might be. Let them hope, just for a second. A girl in the second row leaned forward in her seat. A boy 2 rows behind her stopped writing entirely. Julian resumed, his hand steady. The shortcut held. His solution unfolded with quiet certainty. When he reached the final step, he boxed his answer and set the chalk on the tray beneath the board. Then he stepped back, hands loose at his sides. Silence. Mercer approached. He didn't speak at first. His fingers traced along the lines Julian had written, as though the tactile sensation might reveal an error his eyes had missed. A minute passed. 2. Mercer exhaled slowly. Unconventional, he said at last. But correct. The words hung in the room like a thunderclap. For a moment, no one moved. Then another voice rose from the back of the hall. Clear. Confident. That wasn't just correct, Dr. Elaine Kessler said, standing from her seat. That was elegant. Mercer's jaw tightened. He didn't look at her. His hand rested on the podium, fingers drumming silently. Mr. Cross, Mercer said, his tone mild. Too mild. Why did you deviate from the standard approach? Another test. Another trap. Julian answered without hesitation. Because the standard approach includes redundant steps. This method eliminates them and arrives at the solution more efficiently. A murmur ran through the students. Some scribbled notes furiously, others sat back, stunned. Dr. Kessler smiled faintly. Exactly. Mercer's lips thinned. He adjusted his tie with one hand, a sharp, controlled motion. We'll see if you maintain this level of performance on the next exam. Julian nodded once. We will. As he gathered his things, he heard the whispers again. But they were different now. Not mockery, not doubt, recognition. One of the students who had laughed earlier caught his eye. That was impressive, the student said. Julian didn't pause. I know. The student blinked, then laughed. Fair enough. As Julian walked toward the exit, his steps unhurried, Mercer spoke again. Mr. Cross. Julian paused, but didn't turn. Yes, Professor. A silence followed. The kind Mercer used to unnerve people, to make them second-guess themselves. Julian waited. When Mercer spoke, his voice was low but sharp. I hope you understand what you've started. Julian exhaled slowly. He did. He turned slightly, meeting Mercer's gaze. Dr. Kessler was still standing nearby, arms crossed, watching him. She hadn't looked surprised when he succeeded. She hadn't doubted. Julian glanced at her, then back at Mercer. And I'm not afraid of it. Mercer's expression shifted. Resentment? Recognition? Both? He said nothing more. Julian stepped through the door as it swung shut behind him. His footsteps echoed down the empty hallway. Steady, unfaltering. For the first time, they didn't feel like the footsteps of someone trying to keep up. They felt like the footsteps of someone who had already arrived. Julian adjusted his backpack on his shoulder and exhaled. Not with relief. With resolve. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning.